Hey everyone, my name is Paul Lanzelotti. I am the founder of an MBA consultancy, the Amerrasia Consulting Group. Um, been around for a while now, about 13 years doing this, and I've probably worked with about, oh God, 500 or 600 clients at this point, in varying degrees, of course. Um, so that is what guides the content in today's glorious presentation, which is about how to research and select MBA programs. All right, so what are we going to do today? Well, over the next hour, we're going to discuss the following that you see here. And at the risk of reading this to you like a bedtime story, we're basically going to go over how you can determine and signal to an admissions committee at whatever target school you are applying to that you not only know their school and well, that you're not only a fit on paper, but that you know their school so well that you actually want to attend. Because, believe it or not, admissions committees are very keen to know if you actually want to attend, right? So there's a difference between acceptance rate and matriculation rate. So let's go to the next slide here. All right, don't let this overwhelm you, ladies and gentlemen, but there's really, the purpose of the slide is to demonstrate a number of things. There's a whole bunch of moving parts here with respect to you demonstrating fit at a business school. And not only do they want to know, as I said a couple seconds ago, do you fit on paper? Do you have the right GPA, the right GMAT, the right work experience, yada, yada. But what they also want to know is, holy cow, if they accept you, will you actually attend? So do you have that desire, right? So not only are you the prettiest among all the resumes, but is there a sincere interest here, or are you just throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Nobody wants to be the last person or the second person even at the dance to be asked to dance, right? So if they look at your background, for example, an admissions committee at a school like Columbia or Chicago or Kellogg, they may know that you're probably going to apply to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, the old HSW. So they want to know that you're not two-timing them or you haven't asked everyone to dance or whatever. They don't want to extend an invite, have you maybe accept it and then bail, or never accept it at all, right? It introduces a lot of variability in their process. And when you consider all these moving parts, holy cow, that really makes life hard for admissions committees. And why I believe personally it matters even more to them than one might think is because these individuals are in the admissions committee at any top business school, especially the ones that are fighting to get into the top 5 or 7 schools. It is a popularity contest, meaning it matters extensively, bigly, as somebody might say, where their ranking is with respect to the number of applications they'll get, with respect to what alumni say and feel. And it really does, this is a job after all, and they are trying to move up the food chain. So you may not think that the rankings bear a lot of influence over how decisions are made at a business school. And maybe for the top 2 or 3 schools, they don't. But for the rest of them, it's a beauty contest. Okay, so part of that, by the way, which is why I mentioned this, is that the matriculation rate, the acceptance rate, the matriculation rate, if you have people who are the yield, basically, if you're extending a lot of invites and people aren't accepting, the yield goes down, the admissions percentage goes up, and pretty soon you're accepting any Tom, Dick, or Harry that happens to walk by, right, on 2 legs. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, so overwhelmingly, when you're trying to determine a school, it's not just about all you. I know this latest generation, right? Kidding. It's not just about you, though. It's about whether or not you feel like you're in love with the school, not just I kind of like you with the school. All right, moving on. Okay, everyone, employment reports are your starting point. They're your best friend, best filter at this stage of the game, right? The first thing you should do, besides opening up an application when you apply to a school and reading through all of the online application, all of it, every section, there's a lot of hidden stuff in there. Beyond that, the first point you want to start with respect to researching and determining the right school is the employment report. And this may seem a little too tactical or to the point. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you may love a business school, but if you have no idea as to how they can help you, how that MBA curriculum or experience can help you get the job that you want, then how the hell do you expect the admissions committee to know that as well, right? So don't come into their office on a, via the application with just, no clues, right? You basically have to play to the, to the audience here, preach to the choir, whatever the saying is. You have to be sane. You have to be realistic with your goals, especially your short-term goal. Now, there are schools like Harvard and Stanford, based on my 13 years of experience, that don't care as much about your short-term goal, right? They know if you graduate from Harvard or Stanford, pretty much going to be able to write your own ticket for the most part. But and they're more concerned with how you authentically and actually want to change the world. Okay, setting that aside, every other program, with the exception of MIT Sloan, which legitimately doesn't give a crap about your short-term goal, every other program out there looks at your short-term goal, especially your short-term goal. They care less about the long-term goal, but really the short-term goal. They look at it from more of a recruiter's perspective. So keep that in mind. So your first filter, go to the employment report first. It's a nice, shiny, fancy PDF. It's going to be on somewhere on the website, probably in the Career Center section, right? Go there and start reviewing. I just pulled HEC Paris's because I heard it's beautiful this time of year there. And I put the screenshots up here. And what you'll see is that, okay, there's usually sectors and functions, right? So you want to make sure that two things. The first thing is that the job in the industry that you want actually exists at that school, right? So let's say you're going to go into, manufacturing, whatever, widgets, or you want to go into some type of widget private equity or venture capital, whatever it may be. You want to know that there's a critical mass of people who are actually going into that industry, right? And the other thing I didn't include here, but that I should have, shame on me, is the geography, right? So if you're going and moving to Paris and you're planning on coming back to San Francisco, well, Lord help you, right? But you just want to make sure where the graduates are going, into what industries or sectors, and what specific functions within that industry. And I'll tell you, like, for the most part, if you look here, I'm not sure if you can see my little pointer here, but if you look here, there doesn't, I mean, listen, engineers, you can't go into an MBA engineering flavor. So this is obviously going to be zero for the most part, unless you're going to run an engineering firm, which is few and far between. But you see here that there are just, yeah, the percentages may differ. Okay, fine. But you'll see here that look at all the various functions, right? Look at all the various sectors, right? So if you want to go into something like, well, entertainment, what does this tell you right here? My friends, do not go to HEC Paris, right? They're a wonderful school. Every client I've had there, this is the truth, has really enjoyed that program. But if you're going to do entertainment, you don't have a snowball's chance, right? Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, so here's another point. Third bullet point here: career switchers, right? These schools really don't want career switchers when you don't have to be a career switcher. Okay, as I mentioned, engineering, for example, right? Okay, you're going to be a career switcher, so to speak, right? And we'll get into a little bit more than that. But in military, maybe if you're a Broadway actor, yeah, okay, great. I mean, what else are you going to do, right? You can't continue down in your path for obvious reasons. But look at this. If you're coming from finance, go back into finance. Hold on. If you're, if you're going just consulting, whatever, stay in consulting. Actually, consulting, you can kind of roll back out in the industry. Depends. But be as what is my point? What is Paul's point, everybody? It is be as conservative as possible in your short-term goal, right? Again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the admissions committees are looking at this from the perspective of a recruiter. Always keep that in mind, right? And if you're not the best man or woman for the job, then so long. All right. Here's another thing. Last bullet point on the slide. If your target firm does not recruit, so when you write your essays, you're going to say, I want to go work in product development for, the tech industry for a firm like Amazon or Google. If those schools, so help you God, do not recruit from that target B school, and we'll figure this out in a second here. If they don't, again, you look completely clueless. So you look like you took your goals from some other school and you cut and pasted them here for this school. And you're not showing them any love. You're not showing them any specialization. You're not showing them that you did the basics. And if you don't show them that you did the basics, what are they going to think? Nothing good. All right, moving on. So anyway, they don't recruit from your target B school, then don't mention that firm in your app. Why? Because a short-term goal, and I put an example up here, it must make 100% sense to the AdCom. Okay, if there was more than 100%, it must make 110% sense to the AdCom. So let's take a look at this, what I wrote here. All right, short term, I'm going to assume the name of a certain title or certain role, in the name of a specific group, at the name of a specific tech firm or specific industry, right? Such as firm 1 and firm 2. So Amazon and or Google. That actually recruits at your business school, right? In my role, I will perform 1, 2, and 3 specific responsibilities, and these specific responsibilities must utilize your prior work experience and MBA degree. As a backup, I could also pursue a more conservative short-term goal. Of course, a lot of the time, it's like I could return to my current firm, but assume a more strategic role, whatever, right? Like if you're from Bain, you could go back to Bain, but this time you're a manager, not a schmuck, right? So anyway, name of specific role and firm. So you see how there's what's my point? There's all these specifics here, right? There's even a backup goal. All right. So being very specific here means an opportunity to show that you're really interested in the school because you're naming the right industries or employers, or it's an opportunity to really screw up and show them that you're absolutely clueless for all intents and purposes. So again, short-term goal here, maybe you can start to see why you don't want to be a career switcher if you don't have to be, right? Because your short-term goal is going to rely heavily upon your MBA and your existing work experience, right? And I'll get into what happens if you are a career switcher. Okay. But again, do not name firms who do not recruit at your target business school. Instead, name firms who have recently hired interns and or graduates from the business school in question, right? Else, if you can't find that, right? Let's say you really want to go into design consulting. You really want to work for IDEO or Frog. And you have relevant transferable experience to go there, whatever. Maybe IDEO hasn't hired, or Frog or any design consultancy hasn't hired in the past year. Maybe it's because of the economy. Maybe it's because, they didn't find anybody they liked. Sometimes these firms, these more niche specialized firms, have fewer seats. Maybe they went down the street to INSEAD, who knows, instead of HEC Paris. But here's the deal. You basically, if you can find, so this is the 4th bullet point right here, else name firms with critical mass of alumni or alumni. Hey, typo. But if you can find a critical mass of alumni, maybe the guy or gal who graduated from your target school actually started the firm, for example, and the highest ranks, the executive ranks, are filled with people from a certain business school that you're applying to, then it's okay to name that firm, right? So anyway, so this begs the question. So who are these firms? How do I find these firms, Paul? I'm so glad you asked, Paul. All right. Find out who works where, in what, and for how long, right? So find what are the names of these firms. Build your list. Okay. So again, the best, and I one of the bullet points in the middle of this presentation should be moved up, is LinkedIn is an incredible resource for determining who hires from where and when, right? So anyway, again, so you're trying to find alumni and students. Where do they work? Have they interned there? Whatever. What you want to find out what they do now at the firm. You want to know their work progression from when they graduated from HEC or Harvard or Booth, what they did for their internship, what they did. So find the people. So let's say you want to go into product development, right? You want to go work for the Googs or the Amazonians, right? What you're going to do is you're going to go on LinkedIn. It's as simple as searching for somebody who has an MBA degree from any school, really. But okay, let's say we're hunting down Chicago Booth. That's your target school. Okay, Booth MBA. Go in and see exactly who with a Booth MBA or whatever MBA works at Amazon or Google. What do they do? What do they do now? if they're a few years out, what did they do when they immediately graduated with their MBA? Did they even go work for Google? Maybe they went to, Google Light or some other related company, and then eventually they worked their way up to Google. Maybe they interned at Google back in the day. All right, what was the specific function, job, or role that they had immediately if they did work for Google as an intern? Where did they intern? Not only the geographic location, but which we can kind of narrow down to maybe Northern California, but what group, and also let's say they kept working for Google post MBA, what did they do? Where are they now, right? And then, of course, something very critical is you must determine, what their background was as well. Does it match your background, right? So start looking at graduates from Booth or whatever other school that are in the job that you want. Start working backwards. What commonalities do you see, right? So maybe you're coming out of the military and you think, oh, golly gee, Paul, there's not going to be anyone like me. Well, you don't know that, right? Just look and see, right? And so, yes, it's easier if you're coming from a product development or some product role right now, pre-MBA, but go through and see if you can at least find someone who is like you, right? Even though mom told you you're a unique snowflake, maybe not. Okay, so you're going to want to see what was their progression. Okay, what's the story here, right? And if your story can maybe approximate that, then fine, right? There's precedent. You never want to be the first one to do something in a situation like this, right? Don't be the trailblazer. There's precedent here. Somebody did it before. The other thing to pay attention to, and it's not listed here on the slide, shame on me, is look to see if they list what they did at Chicago Booth as an example. What clubs, what courses, what study abroad experiences, right? All the things that they did there. And then you can take it a step further, go to the Chicago Booth website and Google that person's name, right? Especially if they're a recent grad. See if there's any old posts, any old content on there that describes what they were up to when they were there, right? And why is that important? Well, you'll see here in a few slides, and I don't want to, get too far ahead of myself here, but just because I'm thinking about it right now, it gives you a little bit of a blueprint for what you can say you want to do. If it's relevant, you got to be careful here, based on what you see other people with similar backgrounds to you doing at your target schools, huh? How do you like that? How do you like that for hacking the system? Anyway, so it can be a little bit of a blueprint. Okay, so anyway, so now there's a little bit more work to be done here. Sometimes on LinkedIn, when you go and you read somebody's profile, you're like, oh, they're just like me. The problem is this. When you kind of go look to see what they're doing, they may say product development, senior product developer, senior whatever guru, right? And you're like, oh, I don't know what that is necessarily. I don't know what that person's doing exactly. And here's the thing. Even if you are in product development, pre-MBA, you want to go back in some product group post-MBA, you have to know what you want to do post-MBA in the short term, through your short-term goal, better than almost anyone on the admissions committee. You really have to know it through and through, because you're going to be asked about it in the essays, of course. You're going to be asked about it for sure in the interview, should you get that far. And if you ever go to once COVID passes, right, one of these days, any day now, I'm sure, once that gets past us, you may have to go to an information session or alumni chat. And if you're talking with somebody who, like an alumni who has experience in product development, and you don't, and you're trying to make the move from whatever, the military into product development, right? Don't think you're going to get away with bullshitting these people, right? You don't have to sound as much of an expert as they are. If it's an alumni, it's an extreme case, but you do have to kind of know your shit, right? After all, you are about to spend $200,000 on an education, and you don't even know really what you're doing, right? It's like, would you buy a car without test driving it? Okay, maybe. Anyway, so you want to find the exact job description you want for the role, right? Okay, the best place to start, depending on the company or the industry, like let's say you want to go work for McKinsey's strategic operations group, whatever, go to McKinsey, go to the HR page, and search for that role, whatever role or title you found on LinkedIn, right? You can go to Indeed.com, which is like Monster.com, if that's still around. Shows you how old I am. But anyway, a job board, right? Indeed.com. Go through and make sure the role you're searching for, by the way, is the post-MBA role, not something else. But make sure that, in other words, they're saying like MBA required from a top business school, more or less. So go through, see how that target firm or company describes a role that you want. They'll give you the lowdown and all the requirements. And you're like, okay, now I know exactly what I'm getting into. Now I'm basically an expert. All I have to do is get my MBA, right? Right. So, okay. So anyway, the reason why I said this is a reason that I stated a few minutes ago. Usually, most of the time, here's a little secret. The head of the career center at every school is also a member of the admissions committee, right? So that's a person who's calling bullshit on your application if you walk or you submit an application with just some zany goals, right? That a lot of times zany goals are like, this person's clueless because they're listing a job they can't get, even though it's very specific. Another issue is that people don't even write out with a sufficient number of words their short and long-term goals. It's like, yeah, I might do that thing over there, whatever it is, or that other thing, kind of, maybe, but they don't name the title, the industry, the name of the role, whatever. Remember, you got to be an expert here because you're spending a lot of money and time. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so inevitably, some of you must be career switchers. I mean, there's no getting around it, right? Let's say, I know there's probably a lot of professional athletes on this presentation right now. So let's say you're a professional athlete, ballet dancer, whatever, right? Military, I see a lot of, and you got to go back into, the real world, let's say, quote unquote. If you have to be a career switcher because there's no way of getting around it, okay, fine. Here's the thing. B school is not a place to find yourself. That being said, right? If you must switch careers, you must sell your transferable skills in like a goals essay, right? But you, inside your head, you must know, what is it that I'm doing now in whatever role I'm doing? Let's say in the military. Let's say you're in supply chain in the military, logistics in the military. So you're not the army dude or gal. What you are is the supply chains officer expert, right? As an example. And that is what you need to have in your head, is these are the transferable skills I bring to a new role in the private sector, for example, right? And so you can see here, if you had to sell in italics here, if you were, in the military, or you worked in some whatever college professor, you wanted to go into the real world, right? You need to think, okay, I have a lot of project management skills. I have a lot of team leadership skills and management skills. I have a lot of conflict and crisis resolution skills. I have a lot of deep domain research abilities and expertise. So that's pretty much like, all of those things you can transfer into consulting, okay, maybe finance, wherever it is, a project management role at some big super duper company like Google or Amazon or whatever, General Motors. So focus on that. Now, you need to know that in your head, but eventually, should you be asked by the admissions committee why you're the best man, woman, or child for the role, you're going to need to be able to articulate why, because they may ask you this in an interview, why you're the best person for the job if you've never really done it before so much. And essentially what you're trying to say, of course, is that job that I want in the future has, when you rip off the mask, right? You'll see that the guts of it actually are almost analogous or similar to what I've been doing in the military or in the rodeo or at the circus. Okay. So anyway, you'll need to articulate that to yourself in your head. You'll need to articulate that to the admissions committee through your essays and in an interview, maybe, at a offline session, should you ever meet an alumni at some point in the future, one of these days, when we have a vaccine. Okay, moving on. Now, you need to assess what you must learn. So now that you know what your goals are, and of course you should know what you know now, what are your skills now? And then you look at the job that you want to get in the future, that has a specific set of skills because you looked at the job description online, right? Now there should be a gap there. If there's not, maybe you don't need an MBA. But look at the gap and assess that gap, because when you assess that gap, you know what you must learn in business schools. See? Magic, right? So anyway, all right, and here's some pragmatic advice. If your target school, whatever business school, does not really address what you need to learn, like you want to go into entertainment and you pretty much they don't have an entertainment program, then don't push it. Don't reverse engineer your goals, right? So don't like if you have your heart set on doing something in entertainment, whatever. My advice: move on from the school that's you thought was a target school, but that's not actually a target school. Don't write like 3 different versions of your goals for 3 different schools, right? It just you're going to make your life miserable, and you're going to screw up probably along the way. You're going to be in one interview and articulate some other goal, and whatever, right? Maybe you're not that dumb, right? But it just becomes almost unmanageable at a certain point, right? And the other thing too is it's not actually truthful, right? I mean, remember that being consideration? Well, it is here for your own good. Don't go to a school that can't help you get somewhere, because even though you think you may want to move to New York City or whatever, once you get there, you're going to be effing miserable, man. So don't just move on. Okay. It's a bad relationship. All right. So now getting back to what I was talking about, assess your gaps in knowledge. Okay. So like I said, review your future job description, go back, look at your resume or what you know now. What are the gaps between what you know today and what you're going to need to know tomorrow, right? Start thinking of the functional areas. What do I mean by functional area skills? Could I be any more vague? Well, I probably could, but specifically here, look at the last bullet point at the bottom of the slide. When you're looking for the functional areas that you lack, maybe you're an expertise in supply chain, but when you look at your future goals, there's going to be a lot of like financial management or risk management involved, right? So that's a more realistic example. You're an expert in supply chain and logistics. You get it to the world on time every day. But in the future, because of coronavirus or because of, whatever, climate change, right? If that exists, you're going to have to start thinking more strategically about risk management and creating these types of risk management mitigation plans and strategies. Okay, you get it. So that is a functional area, risk management, right? Maybe your supply chain is only located in North America. Well, in the future, whatever you're doing, you're going to need more international or global logistics or whatever, international global business experience. All right, there's another functional area or gap that you need to address to reach your goals, right? So when you address kind of the areas and they kind of break down in product development, maybe you need more of that knowledge, strategy, finance, ops, econ, whatever it is, try to categorize it and then start looking at the business school, your target business schools, curriculum and the overall, not only the classes, but the clubs, conferences, field trips, study abroads, those type of hands-on experiences as well, right? And you'll start to form a very good idea of whether or not the school is right for you. So let's diving a little bit deeper into this, right? So let's say we're going to use Wharton as an example here, more or less. And there's a link here. I don't know if you guys or gals can click on it. Doesn't really matter, but it pulls up a super duper document. I think it's from 2018 actually, that lists off pretty much everything you ever wanted to know when it comes to the curriculum at Wharton. So there you go. You got something out of this presentation already. But what you're going to do here is you want to go through and start digging into the curriculum. And you want to, so for example, Wharton requires you to define a major up front, right? Most business schools do not. It's more of a generalist approach. But Wharton wants you to specify. And I forgot how many majors they have, 12 or something like that. But how would you know that? Okay, yeah, you read the website, you talked to some alumni. But when you go through and you read this document here, and all schools kind of have something like this somewhere on their website, you just gotta look for it. But basically what that will show you is, oh crap, I have to define a major. I can define up to 2 majors at Wharton for the most part. And I really need to know that for when I'm writing my essay or the interview, or if I'm talking to anybody from the admissions committee, but I need to know that for myself so that I can focus on, researching a certain part of that curriculum and knowing everything about it, from the, field studies I could take to the actual classes, right? So you go through and you find out, you start developing a list, right? You start develop. So, okay, you're the guy who's in the military or gal who's in the military, right? And you're getting out of supply chain and you want to go move into cross-border international risk management for whatever company in the future, right? All right, so you and you're looking at job descriptions, post-MBA job descriptions, and you kind of know you need more international experience and global exposure. You know you need more skill in developing strategy, organizational strategy. You probably need some more experience in risk management, right? As a very specific field or knowledge area. Okay, and I'm sure there's a few others, right? But you have this list, all right. So, and I just say 3 functional areas, right? Just start with that. For each functional area, as you're going through that guide or you're going through a target school's curriculum, try to find 3 elective courses that provide more specific knowledge that you require. Listen, why you want to do elective courses? Because every Tom, Dick, Harry, or Mary, right? They all take the curriculum, the core courses, right? They all take those core curriculum courses. So it's really no use if you're saying, well, operations, during my first quarter or semester there, it's like, okay, yeah, we get it. If you have a gap in ops, skip straight to the elective courses, pick those, right? Now it gets a little tricky here because although you can, listen, per school it gets tricky because Wharton, you can do up to 2 majors, I believe. Somebody check me on that. And if you're saying I need to do there's like a kind of a risk management related major, like a decisions operations thing. But that does not exclude you from picking or choosing electives in other majors, right? Now, you only have so many electives that you really can take outside of your major or 2 majors, but it's okay. At every business school, even if you're specializing in a certain track or function or whatever part of the curriculum, there will be opportunities for you to take courses in other areas of the MBA curriculum, but also, here we go, at other schools on campus, most likely. And by the way, some schools encourage you to do that, like Chicago Booth and Stanford GSB, right? All right. So getting back to what we were talking about, develop a list of like 9 electives that address the 3 functions. So 3 per functional area, hopefully. Now go through and you're going to get on the Google, right? You're going to open up a new tab. You're going to go to Google and you're going to Google the name of that class, preferably in quotes, and the word PDF. And you're going to try to find a PDF that describes what the heck is going on in that class. Why? Because PDFs usually mean the syllabus, right? And whether it's Word, PDF, or written on a wax tablet, you want to read through the entire syllabus. Don't be the person, right, that just reads the snippet of the description and thinks, okay, I'll name that one, right? Now, that may be good for an initial filter, but go through, for the love of God, and read the whole PDF, because you don't want to get caught with your pants down one day where first of all, you won't actually know if it's the right course for you if you don't read through the whole syllabus, right? But also, when you go to write your essays or explain in an interview to the member of the admissions committee or an alumni at an event or whatever, you're going to want to be able to talk about these things as if you give a shit, which means giving a shit means reading through the whole damn syllabus, right? And then being to articulate those. You don't have to know everything, but you do need to know that. And you can go through and you can talk about it like an expert. So if you're trying to impress an admissions committee person, and remember the first question was like, okay, I like him or her. They're qualified on paper, but will they actually want to, show up? Do they actually love me, or are they just in like with me? Whatever. So the more you can articulate how deep you've dove into certain areas, then they will believe you. Remember, you don't boil the ocean. You don't have to know everything about a targeted MBA program. You should know the basics, like their marquee or premier experiential learning experiences, maybe a few of the top professors. But listen, if you're not a finance person, then you don't really need to know about whatever Professor Fama at Chicago Booth if you're not going to be involved. Yeah, okay, he's nice. He exists. Michael Porter over at HBS, if he's still there, whatever. Doesn't matter. Just dive deep into the curriculum, right? In your specific relevant area that you need to learn. This is all very important. Okay. Now, what else? Okay, so come up with like a list of 9 courses. All right. So just like I was saying, now you're going to determine. So now you have the 9 courses in your pocket, preferably experiential courses, by the way. And what do I mean by that? There's some type of experiential, hold on, back it on up. Let me get into my time machine here and go back a few seconds. The best things to pick are, they don't have to be the most famous courses in your list of 9, but you want them to be, of course, the most relevant, but pick the ones that are actually freaking interesting, where alumni come in. and help teach the class, right? Where maybe there's a project during the class, most of the class, where you go out into the field and you help some local nonprofit, right? Or whatever. Those are the more interesting ones. And the only way you're actually going to really know what the hell's going on is if, of course, you read the syllabus, right? So listen, you can, like at Stanford GSB, there's this interpersonal dynamics touchy-feely class. I believe it is an elective, and there's critical analytical thinking at Stanford GSB. Okay, a lot of people name that, and it's okay to name those classes if you have no critical analytical thinking abilities, and that's what you really need in order to reach your goals, right? Just make sure it's relevant and you're not going with whatever is the most popular course there. Because I'll tell you right now, every Joe Schmo or Josephine Schmo will be naming that class off with very little thought. I want to become a better leader because and that'll happen through the touchy-feely interpersonal dynamics class. Okay, I mean that's like a D plus in terms of like you demonstrating your knowledge, right? Pick something more unique as long as it's relevant. Okay, moving on. So everything I told you on the last side was more or less in the classroom, more or less. Even if it is you have a little bit of a field trip or whatever, you get to go out to the New York Stock Exchange, some class at Columbia, or alumni come into the classroom and talk to you about hedge funds at Columbia, of course. But for the most part, there are other classes that aren't even in the classroom for the most part, right? And every single school has them. And these are the marquee, pragmatic, hands-on, in the field study, roll up the sleeves, in the trenches projects, right? You do get class credit for them. They are technically classes, but you never really put your butt in a seat in a traditional classroom, right? So, Haas has build, Anderson has AMR, yada, yada. Wharton, for the sake of our example here, has global modular courses, and they have something else called GIP. They have more, right? They used to have something else called, I forgot what it was called, but it was pretty cool. They killed it a couple years back, whatever. But here, find 2 or 3 pragmatic, in the field, hands-on learning experiences. And they may take you overseas. They may take you whatever, on a ship for a month. I don't know. Whatever it is, find those courses. And again, make sure that you read everything about that, because what the purpose of these classes are in your mind and in the whole learning experience is not just a nice sunny field trip, right? Not just going to get some fresh air and stretch your legs. The purpose, my friends, or people on this call, is actually to apply what you have learned, some part of it in the real world, testing it, honing it, shaping it, molding it, right? Seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, maybe going back to the business world or going back to the drawing board in order to have more of an effect in the real world of business, right? So when you look at those electives that you picked, the 9 of them from the last slide, right? And you know exactly what is going down and what you're going to learn in those classes. What you want to be able to, in some way, hopefully, is when you say, I want to go on my global immersion program or my global module courses, you want to be able to say some aspect of what I learned in those more classroom courses, those more traditional courses that I listed off, 9 of them. I'm going to take some element of it, whatever, some supply chain knowledge that you got from some classroom course. And now, through this global modular course, which is like a 2 to 3 day course where you fly on a plane to some foreign fancy location and you do whatever, I'm going to apply whatever I learned in the Wharton classroom in supply chain to a global modular course in supply chain or logistics or whatever, right? Something like that. Now, that's an ideal world. Oftentimes it's not going to be a one-to-one fit, whatever. That's probably a different presentation. All right. So now, when I say down here, this is where it gets a bit trickier. Sometimes, and this isn't a huge point for now, but sometimes you may not be able to determine, well, whatever I learned in that class, I don't see how I can apply it through my GIP, and that's okay, right? Don't force fit stuff. Don't create made up things if it's not actually there. Just know to look for them. If they're there, sure, you can definitely say that. But there are so many things that you're going to learn on a GIP, supposedly, that even if it's not directly related to a logistics GIP, and that's what you're specializing in at your major at Wharton, and that's what you learn through all those classes you listed, it is okay to list GIP or GMC or whatever, because the main point is that there are other things you're going to be learning across all your classes not just the supply chain or logistics ones that you can apply through your GMC or GIP. I'm probably digressing here, moving off point. So let's move on. All right. So again, let's recap here for a little bit. So we talked about the courses and clubs. You're going to develop 9 of them. We talked about the marquee experiential hands-on in the field learning experiences like GIP and GMCs at Wharton. Okay, so where you're going to apply a lot of what you learn in the classroom, hopefully. Now, there's another element here that's missing that you're going to need to define and know in your head and articulate in an interview or in an essay that lets the reader or the admissions committee at a targeted school know you really want to go to their school, right? And this is all part of the research and selecting a program, which is determining your leadership training needs, right? So we had the knowledge you learned in the classroom, we applied it in the real world, and that kind of helped hone your management leadership, let's say, your ability to execute. But now there's this kind of higher level of, or bigger concentric circle with respect to leadership training, right? So, and I always kind of like to end essays with these leadership training needs. So you go on, and here's a quote. I probably should have put this in quotes. Wharton, provides me the crucial leadership development I need to run my own firm. I need to develop a deeper understanding of my leadership and interpersonal skills. This is why I'm looking forward to Wharton's yada 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 360-degree yada yada, and as well as leadership ventures. Okay, whatever you're gonna name off, right? Now, don't copy this and put it in your essay because you will get busted. But this is basically an example of what you would say when it comes to leadership development, right? So, anyway, and every school has this layer of leadership stuff that you need to work on. And so, what you're essentially trying to say is, when I go to business school, right, I need not only management like book knowledge, and I need to test it and hone it, but I also need, especially for my more longer term goals, the ability to lead, which is to get everybody on the same page, people with opposing ideas, get them all on the same page, march them all in the same direction, get everybody to see how critical they are to the process, right? And really, great managers do not necessarily make great leaders, right? Just keep that in mind. And so here, with a lot of these programs that you see at business school, one-on-one coaching, 360-degree leadership feedback, Chicago Booth has LEAD. What they're trying to do is to get you to see how much of a jerk you are. And what I mean by that is they're trying to get you to see what you lack as a leader, right? So maybe you can get the trains to run on time. You're very effective at project work, but if you have to if you are, nobody wants to work for you, right? Arguably that is good management, maybe, but not good leadership, right? So if you have to do everything by force, we don't know anybody like that. If you have to really pressure people and twist their arm to get things done, all right, those types of things, if you are a leader like that, you have a lot to work on. And when you work with an executive coach in the one-on-one mentoring program at Wharton, and every school has one, or you engage some type of 360-degree leadership feedback program at Wharton or any other top business school, you can expect that your mentor, your coach, or even your peers at that school are going to call you out on that stuff, right? And knowing, because a lot of times people are poor leaders, managers, whatever, they don't even realize it, right? Or they don't take it seriously. But at this point, the idea here through these programs is to kind of, take the emperor's clothes off, so to speak, reveal his inadequacies, so to speak, and pretty much be open and sincere about receiving new feedback from these people and changing and, turning from a, larva pupa into a beautiful butterfly type thing. So here, that's why you need to mention these things, right? In addition to the management skill I'm going to learn, I need to work on my leadership. And okay, you're not going to say you're a jerk. Okay, I was kind of kidding. I'm sorry. But what you are going to say is I do have a lot to work on, because think about this. Using the risk management example, I need to build greater risk management abilities, greater strategy abilities, greater abilities to manage teams across borders and, cross-border companies and groups. But I also need to work on my leadership ability. So I know in the future that there will be situations like coronavirus where it's just unprecedented, basically. And there is no playbook, there is no blueprint. And that is what we'll call upon. I can't go back to page 17 in some book I paid too much for at Wharton and find the answer. So I'm going to have to galvanize people and get everybody, all the smartest people on the same page, marching in the same direction to determine what that direction is. That is not a function necessarily of what I learned. in the class or even outside of the class, but definitely the leadership training I'm going to receive at Wharton, right? So it would be something like that, right? And with respect to risk management. Now, finally, and I know a lot of you in here are like, what about all the people from Wharton or the business schools that I talked to? I mean, doesn't that count? Should I name drop? That's basically what's jammed into the latter half of this slide down here with your interaction with the Wharton community, right? So what's going on here? So yes, you do want to mention. So listen, Harvard and Stanford don't give a shit about the people you talk to, because the way those two schools think about it, especially Harvard, is, hey, where else would you want to go? So you could talk to everybody in their mom and dad, doesn't matter, right? We know we're at the top of the heap, more or less, right? So they get that you want to go there. There's not a problem with that. It's the same thing with Stanford, more or less, unless the two schools are competing against each other. That's a different slide. One not in this presentation. But what I'll say here is that you basically, if from Wharton on down, right, from all the schools that have a chip on the shoulder about whether you're two-timing them or whether or not you're going to ask them to the dance, whether or not you're serious about attending, should they accept you, those are the schools where you basically want to say, if you talk to anybody or if you visited campus one of these days in the future, that you did that, right? And you don't have to go on and on and on about it, but if you work with people from Wharton or Booth or wherever, say that. And hopefully you can say they've been great mentors. They've indelibly shaped my career path and yada, yada, and made me into the young man or woman I am today. Okay, great. But without going overboard, of course. But here you're basically going to say, like, I showed up, or I talked to the gentleman, I got a first person sense. I talked to Susie Smith, Joe Blow, Josephine Blow, whatever, Raj Singh, and I learned a lot about. So their first person point of view put everything that I was reading or seeing or learning about into a first person perspective, a student's perspective, an alumni perspective, whatever, made it all that real to me, right? And if you can visit class, okay, that's even better. But just make sure they know that you've made the effort to go through and not only just read about the stuff and not only read the syllabus, as Paul so wisely told you, but that you have actually worked with these individuals in some capacity. And if not that, you've actually taken the time to reach out to somebody at the school. Now, go to the admissions webpage, and there should be some ambassador program, hopefully, or let's see, start dialing, right? Go to the club web pages at Wharton or any other school, see who the officers are. If you're interested in that club, and this will all be done as part of your research, get the email address and email that person and try to set up a Skype chat, talk, or I don't know if anybody uses Skype anymore, whatever, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, you get it. Try to, in the very least, try to get an email conversation going back and forth. Now, the hit rate or the response rate will tell you guys and gals a lot about the culture of that school, right? Or whether or not they're overwhelmed. So some schools expect to get, a few responses, but at schools like Tuck, maybe Duke, you can probably expect to get a bit more, right? Anyway, whatever. So what else? So the other thing too, by the way, and this is kind of germane or relevant to the point here about your interaction with the Wharton community, but overall, these schools are looking for you to go to that level of effort, right? If you don't at least do what I'm telling you to do in this presentation, they may like you, but they're not absolutely convinced. And that's when you get into waitlist territory, right? If you come to the table with a 780, yeah, maybe they'll accept you, but maybe not, right? I've known plenty of clients that I have that have gotten into Harvard and Stanford both, but not Wharton, because Wharton knows they don't stand a chance, right? Even if they did do all the all the stuff I said here, it's a strange phenomenon, but it happens, right? So the other thing too, I would say at this point when you're researching schools is, besides doing all of this here that I advocate you do, the you want to, another technique or tactic you can use is to kind of start at the end, which is to go and look at the interview reports, kind of the end of the line. Go to the end of the line, look at the interview reports, which is arguably the interviews of the last thing you're going to experience for the most part in this whole application journey, and go and see what questions they're asking, right? Because that is I don't know if anybody here plays poker, but that is a tell. So when you see questions like, Hey, what other schools are you applying to? Right there, that is I won't call it a big red flag, but it is definitely a strong signal that this school is worried about its applicants or its interviewees or people applying to their school, two timing them or triple timing them or whatever, dating every pretty person on Tinder or whatever people are using, right? So they they it signals a lack of confidence on their part, right? And of course, I can tell you how to answer that question. How much time do we have? Listen, whenever somebody asks you a question like that, yeah, it is a trick question. Let's not kid ourselves, right? What you're trying to say is, we'll use Columbia, and I'm going off topic here, but Columbia, Chicago, and let's say you're playing to Wharton, right? Now, obviously, Chicago kind of knows they might be the odd man out, or Columbia, not Wharton. But what you're going to say is like, or let's say Kellogg, right? And what you're going to say is, all these schools are excellent, wonderful, totally cool schools. They will help me meet my goals. That is why I applied to all 3 or 4 of these schools. But with Kellogg or whatever school is kind of, the underdog, you would go and say, but by far, my interaction with members of your community, what's your school's name? Kellogg. Yes. My interaction with your crew and your people, alumni, students, faculty, whoever I could get, cereal box with Kellogg's on it, right? My interaction with all of that has totally differentiated the school in my mind, right? Now, you don't have to say they're first, right? But you want to say the nature of my interaction with people from your authentic community has been that incrementally, ginormously, bigly better than every other school that's out there. So you're not really taking away anything from Columbia, Booth, and Wharton. What you're just saying is that your team, your crew, your students, your alumni at Kellogg made the extra effort to make me feel like that I was welcome, that my questions weren't stupid. They reached out to me. They spent the time. I even talked with Susie Smith on the phone for an hour one time. And that level of outreach, that level of care to somebody like me, little old somebody who's a nobody like me, somebody who's just applying out of the blue, told me a lot. Now, it's not like they have to be a random person you reached out to. It could be your buddy at work or your uncle or your cousin or your aunt, whoever it is. The level of the interaction differentiated their school. And I hope that's true, to be honest with you, right? But what is somebody going to say in an interview that's interviewing you, from a member of the admissions committee or whatever? What are they going to say? Like, no, that didn't happen. Nope, I don't believe you. No, it's like, listen, we know Wharton, for all intents and purposes, will be chosen over Kellogg if you get into both. But you got to throw these people a bone on the Kellogg admissions committee, or else they'll never really have the Kellogg option, right? So make the effort to reach out. And I guarantee you, and I'm not kidding, this is nothing against Wharton, but I do have to believe, based on my 13 years of experience, that when you reach out to somebody from Kellogg, they may actually be a little friendly. I mean, it all depends, right? It really more depends on industry, from what I've seen, not necessarily the school, but whatever. All right. So what else is there? So go look at the interview, go look at the questions. Another question, Tuck asks this question. They ask you, have you ever lived during the interview, have you ever lived in a rural, countryside environment ever before in the past, right? Now, half of the people on this call or this presentation just crap their pants, right? That's not actually what they're asking. I mean, they do ask that literally, but what they're asking is, if no, where have you been in environments where you were kind of forced to interact and be friends and have an intimate environment where everybody flourishes, right? So even if you've never gone to undergrad or grad school or worked or grew up in a small town, you can say no, but that's exactly why I'm applying to Tuck, because it is a rural environment, right? It's because I've never lived or been anywhere near a farm or a pig or whatever. But here's the thing, I do know the value of an intimate learning environment, because that's what I experienced in my group at work or whatever. Every summer I went to a camp and we did like really close knit things, whatever that is. Anyway, so just know, when you're demonstrating. So what's my point, Paul? To drive the point home here is that if you go to the end, you go to the interview questions, you can find them online at gmatclub.com or other websites online, and you start reading through and you see that they're asking very targeted or weird questions. What are the schools you applied to? How will you contribute specifically to our learning culture here, or learning environment, and what roles and what involvement? And that's when or have you ever lived in a rural environment, right? For Tuck, that's when these schools have a bit of a hang up, or a complex, let's say, or a chip on their shoulder, at least one of them, about whether or not you are in love with them or whether or not you're in like with them. Anyway, so I believe that is the last slide, except for questions, and I see that there are some questions or comments rather. Anyway, so let me look at some of these questions here. I'll start. I like starting with the most recent ones. So let's go in reverse order. Oh, so Rushil says, bye, Bandy Kasi. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Karun Kumar says, while reaching out to ADCOMs to connect to his students' faculty, in the email, should I give a brief background? No. So usually they'll have a form, Mr. Kumar. Usually they'll have a form online that you should go and fill out, right? Okay. If they don't have that, you have to know your audience a bit better. So you would just say, like, I'm interested in applying. I've attached my resume. You can do that. But just say, I'm interested in speaking with a current student. I know you guys have a program that I read about on your website that hooks me up if they don't have a form or something. Looking forward to hearing from you. Love, Mr. Kumar, right? So that's it. Keep it brief. Listen, the people on the admission, okay, for everybody on the call, people on the admissions committee, they don't want to read this stuff, right? It's a job, right? They like that you're reaching out, but if you make it some wordy biography, or it's as long as the 10 Bibles, they're going to think something's wrong with you. They're going to think it's completely inappropriate. Just get to the point right away. Avoid the niceties even. It's like, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Admissions Committee member, or whoever. I would like to set up an informational interview with you or with a current student or whatever. I'm applying this fall, and in round one or whatever round. For a little bit more about me, I've attached my resume. Attach it. I look forward to hearing from you. Boom, the end, right? They know what you want. That's it. They read it in 10 seconds or 5 seconds and they're done. Okay, so, okay. Oh, your CV isn't ready. Maybe I should read a little bit more instead of telling everybody else to read till the end. So, well, you need to get one together, right? I mean, that's all you can put down some bullet points, right? Don't dump everything in the kitchen sink in there, but like get your CV ready, because when you go to talk to these people on the admissions committee or their admissions ambassadors, they're going to want to see that, right? So, you kind of got to like adjust to what they want you to do rather than the opposite. There's no reason, Mr. Kumar, why you don't have a CV, why if you didn't put in another 2 or 3 or 4 hours and then have your buddies look at it and all this stuff, why you couldn't. There's tons of, listen, here's another thing. If you don't know what your resume or CV should look like, it's got to be one page, of course. I'm serious about that. But go do this. Go Google. So get on the Googs again, right? New tab. And what you're going to type out is something like resume book, Columbia MBA or Stanford MBA or Harvard MBA, but resume book or club resume book, because all these clubs, healthcare club, for example, will have resume books, right? Go through and find those resumes. You'll see how they describe, of course, try to find one from your industry, right? But go through and try to find enough. And then you'll see how people describe that stuff. You'll see how it's formatted. You'll see how, whatever, they break up stuff. Go and do that, right? If anybody on this call right now, and I suspect there might be a few, is from IIT, okay? I love my IITians, but that resume format they have you guys jam all of your experience onto with all the little boxes. Some of them are gray. I know you know what I'm talking about. That is not the right format, right? That is the maximum. So formats are, resumes are something that should look aesthetically pleasing. There should be some white space. It's not jamming 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag, right? So love y'all from the IITs, but fix that and go look at the resume formats. Oftentimes schools will want you to put your resume into their format. MIT does that. So there's something for you to, MIT Sloan does that. I think NCR does that. Just go and look, please, for the love of God. Okay. Less is more in this case. All right. So let's see here. Grim, sir, where can we find top colleges with course-wise rankings? All right, let me come back to that question. Can I share the link to that page? Why? Yes, I think I can actually. Let me cut and paste it off the presentation here. Or, type it out. You know what? I don't think I can actually reply. And you know what? I just realized that I can't actually type in anything to respond to your comments. So it looks like you're going to start typing. All right. It's not that bad. Just, yeah. Okay. Anyway, just Google the name of the file online and you should be able to find it. Okay. So great compilation to look at before applying. Can we get the PDF? Yeah. If you email me, email that GMAT club at amerrasiaconsulting.com. And then I'll know for sure that it's from this presentation and I won't ignore it. Will this video be available later? Yes, the answer is yes, it will. On GMAT Club's YouTube website, I'm pretty damn sure that's where it will be. Paul, thanks for your support as always. Hey, you're welcome. All right, so let me go back down to the bottom here. Maximo, and I see you. Okay, so if one wants to do as Palev says, if one wants to do a second MBA, what other aspects should be highlighted in the SOP? Say for Wharton or the application, say for Wharton, which does not explicitly state that they don't want second MBAs. Yeah, I mean, listen, if they don't want second MBA, or if they don't state that the second MBAs are do not apply, right? If they don't specifically ban people from MBAs applying to their school, you can apply. And it's very rare that you would see a school ban that. Now, I can tell you right now, if you just finished your MBA at the University of Texas and now you want to apply to Harvard, well, you know, and it's been a year or two, or it's been recent, you're not getting in, right? But I do understand, especially since, oh man, at least 2/3 of my clients are from India, right? I've seen the old, you know, I got that MBA right after I graduated from undergrad because, you know, I thought it would be valuable. And really what it comes down to is the diversity of people in there and their experience, because everybody's going to be a noob basically in there, in that type of MBA experience. And it's going to be a completely different experience than what you would experience now. It'd basically be like a diploma diploma in management, more or less, right? Which is, I think, something else that you can get immediately upon graduation in India. But regardless, you, in the optional essay, you would explain and listen, if you don't know because you can't find it on the website and you're freaking out and you don't want to waste your time, email or call the school asking. I think it's better to email, but email and ask if they're cool with somebody already having an MBA, right? And you can put a little bit more in there about, okay, I got it just recently. But in the optional essay, for sure, on your application, you want to put in there that, you know, I want to explain why I'm applying and while I already have my MBA, because for the most part, it's not actually an MBA in the I guess American or top business school sense. Really, this was something that I now know was a you won't say it was a mistake. Never really say it was a mistake unless they ask you for a mistake in an essay. That's a different essay. But you would say like it just wasn't what you guys at Wharton or Harvard or wherever offer, right? And knowing what I know now, knowing what I need to learn, which is in my goals essay, and not in this essay, I completely understand and know why this is the right experience for me now, right? And I have articulated these reasons or explained or described these reasons in other parts of my application, including the goals essay, the end, right? So, um, okay, so what else? Oh, oh wow, somebody gave me a compliment. Wow, thank you. See, thanks, Dad. No, honestly, oh God, that last name, Mr. Parasuraman. Thank you for that's very nice. Just made my day, actually. All right, so let's see, GMAT Club Team Cadentia. Okay, thanks for the follow-up question. I have a draft version 12. Thank you, because I don't look at anything below 12. All right, but still an ongoing process. I don't want to submit this one. Come on, you don't need, Mr. Kumar. This is like, and I mean this in the best possible way, shit or get off the pot. Like, dude, you don't need it to be perfection. If you want it to be perfection, you're going to get to draft 20, right? Whatever you have, they're not going to blacklist you if there's like a typo or the column's a little off or whatever. Just find a template from that school or a top business school, make it more like that, right? Your work experience, if you're not sure how to describe every bullet point, again, get on LinkedIn. Look how other people describe being a product manager or whatever is going on, right? And model your language around that, right? But don't take forever, because then don't let it be the bottleneck here. It's almost inconsequential, right? So just move your behind and get it done, and don't expect perfection, because you'll be here a month full of Sundays, right? And there won't be any payoff. In fact, you'll screw yourself because you'll never get a meeting with anybody. Sir, Where can we find information on how a school caters to the needs of your MBA? Well, okay. um, okay, go first thing, watch this entire presentation from the beginning, and then um, whatever. I mean, LinkedIn. Go through this presentation again because I think you may have just shown up about a few minutes ago. All right, so can you take an MBA? So, Mr. Fang or Sethu Hawaut Fang, asks, can you take an MBA if you already taking a early master's degree program and finance? Absolutely, you can, right? Remember, an MBA is more of a generalist degree depending on what school you go to. At Booth, it's kind of more of a specialist degree, whatever. But it's more of a generalist degree. All you have to be able to do, Mr. Fang or Mrs. Fang, cool last name, by the way, um, you you just need to be able to articulate in an optional essay or in your goals essay why don't focus on necessarily on that degree and making excuses for it and all this stuff. You need to explain it in the optional essay. Remember, your goals essay and the purpose of your research is to articulate how an MBA fits the gaps you have today. So you have an undergrad, you have a graduate degree in finance, right? Now, whatever it is you want to do in the future and whatever it is you're doing now, including the education you have, there must be a gap there, right? Whatever that gap is, that's what you need to first assess and analyze so that you know why you need an MBA. And then you can start to go dig into the curriculums of each individual school to see exactly what tracks do they have, or what specializations do they have in finance or whatever. Yeah, so if it happened longer ago, you're absolutely fine. I mean, listen, there's going to be a lot of people applying to school who have a lot of experience, who have an undergraduate degrees in business or commerce or whatever, and now they're going to go get another graduate degree in business. Why? So it's kind of the same argument, kind of. Why would somebody with an undergraduate business degree now need a master's? And they've gotten plenty of business experience. They've done well. Why? Right? There is a why. You just have to start digging into. You have to assess the gaps based on what it is you want to do in the future and start digging into the curriculum, right? And then you'll see it'll become much more clear to you. John loves my honest perspective. Thank you for the presentation. You're welcome, sir. All right, so Mohammed Fahad, very informative session. Thank you. Later on, will you be doing profile evaluation? Yeah, I do. I have a thread on there. I think it's called Ask Paul Lanzalotti. Now, there's probably cobwebs on that thread because I haven't answered a lot because I'm busy now actually producing work for clients, but I'll get back on there. So if you post there, and please post there, don't email me your questions because then I'd like the world to see how much I know, right? So whatever, post on that thread and I promise I'll check it by this weekend. All right, or not. All right, so Erdogan says, Paul, what do you think about both function sector change? Uh-oh, especially for engineers. Okay, so Erdogan, you sometimes when you're an engineer, as I was back in the day, don't remind me. Thanks, Mom. But really back in the day, you basically had an issue. All engineers have to make this jump, right? All engineers are going to go through this. So if it's a drastic change where you have to basically figure out both the function and the sector, it's okay. Listen, most engineers, to be honest with you, they go into consulting, right? You have all the basic project management and things like that, those skills. So don't worry about it too much. You just need to know, listen, it's very common for engineers. You'll find a ton of engineers to go into things elsewhere at an MBA. I would encourage you to consider what you're doing now. Well, listen, if it's a drastic change where you're going to go and basically, join the circus or whatever you're going to say upon graduation, then of course that's something where you basically cannot and do not want to say that. But here's the thing: if you basically, whatever you're doing as an engineer now, whatever function or sector that is, okay, maybe you need to throw that away if you're a mining engineer or something, right? But what you can definitely say is, like, just think of mining or manufacturing, or maybe you're making UAVs, whatever. That's all manufacturing, or that's all supply chain, or that's all this, or that's all that, right? What you're going to say is, go look at McKinsey. I would encourage you to consider management consulting. Go look at McKinsey, their website, Bain BCG. Go look at their industries and sectors. So break down what they do and what they charge you for, a lot of money, by industry and sector, and go through and look to see what, you know, where your skills, not necessarily your mining expertise, but if you are very good with like heavy industry, right? And you go and you read, so go to McKinsey, go to their practices, read about the sample projects that practice or that group has engaged, right? See who their clients are. Maybe their clients are a mining company, but more than that, see what the nature of the work is. If it's a lot of ops work, or if it's a lot of this, or if it's a lot of that, then you're totally cool, right? That should be your guide. So don't, so admissions committees know it's going to be a switch. Just go and do the research, um, you know, that way more or less. So anyway, okay, you said aviation sector. Very nice. Willing to switch long-term out. Okay, here's another thing I forgot to mention here, everybody. Red flag warning. Upon graduation from any MBA program, do not say you want to start something, right? Do like you want to be an entrepreneur. Long term, fine. Long term, you can, bring running water to every village in the world in Flint, Michigan, right? But you basically do not want to say that because you're kind of listen. These schools are machines set up to pump out graduates that go into certain sectors, right? They have these silos, and they're gonna funnel you into one of those silos, right? Do not say you want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe that works, or maybe a lot of people at Stanford can do that, but I guarantee you, like nobody, unless they're crazy, said when they're applying to Stanford, anyone who got in did not say I want to be an entrepreneur upon graduation. Maybe that one person, but okay, everybody else never got in. I co-founded a medical devices startup earlier. Okay, so even if you, if you co-founded a medical devices startup, right? You want to, and you want to continue working on that at business school. In your optional essay, I would tell you, explain what is going to go on with your company. Like if you have a co-founder or whatever, a team, that will allow you to spend all of your time full time in a program in a business school and still have that company run well. And then you can say immediately upon graduation, I will return to my company, and obviously more senior role, whatever that could possibly be, CEO, and do that, right? Now, let's say you moved on from co-founding a medical devices startup, you sold it, whatever happened to it, even if it failed. I still would strongly advise you against saying immediately upon graduation, I want to do that, right? I would encourage you more to go into maybe product management at, in med tech, right? Something like that. But again, mine LinkedIn, go to LinkedIn, see who is working where and for what, right? Anyway, so, all right. Short-term product management. Sorry for the partial responses. Sorry for my partial answers. Yeah. So yeah, you're on the right track, right? But you just got to do the research to make sure that exists, right? So at Wharton, for example, they have a healthcare management major. Does anybody graduate from that healthcare management major? Would you have to apply kind of on a separate track if you're going to apply to Wharton? You have to go and see, is there anybody there that graduates and goes into product dev for a medical devices company, right? And I think you'll see that there might be a few, but a lot of the people graduate going to like finance, in healthcare and things like that, or whatever. But just make sure. So again, LinkedIn is your friend. Okay, so Mohammed Fahad says a lot of people talk about demographic pool. I'm originally from India, and Mohammed, I think you've been on one of these calls before, dude. Yeah. I think you have I think your dad or something. Is this a family company, this automotive company, or is this maybe it's a different Mohammed Fahad, right? Anyway, so the Ohio State University, forgot to put the in front of Ohio State. But anyway, so will that put, no, you're not going to be in the same pool. Even if you are a citizen of the beautiful country of India, right? You're not going to be in the same pool, right? So even if you are an Indian male, right? Don't assume that all Indian males are created equal, right? So listen, look around, Mohammed. How many other guys from India from your undergrad, not from your undergrad, from India jump to Ohio State? Okay, maybe there's a bunch. Okay, but then do what you do now. There's far fewer than there are more, right? So are you going to be judged against the demographic of everybody who stayed in India for whatever reason? And no, the answer is absolutely not, right? Now, you will still have some of the same challenges in terms of like work visas, and it will still be an international student, whatever. But depending on how you position yourself, you may have a leg up. I would suspect that you do have a leg up, right? And again, over somebody who may work in the automotive industry in India, never left the country, never did this, never did that, right? Now, you can squander that lead if you fail to articulate in some of your essays as to why it was so important that you go to the Ohio State University and leave India and how you matured. And it all depends on the question that's being asked at the school, right? If they ask you what your favorite color is, you can't really talk about this. But if they ask you about what motivates you and your values, what matters most to you and why, Harvard asks, tell us anything you want that we wouldn't already assume about you. You would go and you would articulate a lot of that journey. And therefore, extending your lead because of some of these, traveling abroad and what it may have done to you, how it may have made you mature a bit more. So anyway, okay, so Satyaki Sharma says, how much does a gap year, 11 months to be precise, between my first and second job? Okay, well, it depends on what you were doing in that gap, right? It depends why that gap was created in the first place. So, if you were sick, had some horrible disease or something that you needed to recover, totally sane. Now, it does not replace the fact that you, may have 1 year less of work experience. But at the end of the day, if it taught you something or made you realize something, or it affected your subsequent job that you had, where you decided to stop being an accountant and start your own business, and it became awesome, then yeah, it's the gap isn't going to mean anything, right? If you only have 1 year of work experience or 2 years of work experience, and one of those is where you were laid up in a hospital bed, yeah, it's a problem. If you had, now sometimes people have, and I'm not saying this is you, by the way, sometimes people have some mental health issues or whatever. To be honest with you, and a long time ago, and I've been doing this for 13 years, I used to think, yeah, you don't really want to disclose that too much. And the way I feel now is, if you can articulate what you learned from that experience, people's, especially in the States, ideas and thoughts and opinions about mental illness has changed a lot over the years, right? And if it made you a stronger, more resilient person, um, and you have the condition in check or whatever, then it's totally fine to write about that and how it changed you, in the optional essay or in one of the main essays. If it, what matters most to you and why, or whatever, the Harvard one. Totally, right? So it can make you come across as very human, very honest, and someone to admire, right? If it's executed correctly. If it's not executed correctly, you come across as a disingenuous narrator who's tugging on the strings of your audience, and basically somebody who might not be telling the complete truth or doesn't know what they're talking about, right? So there's a fine line between that and that, right? All right. So so you're welcome, Erdogan. So what else do we have here? Okay, so Parag says, I've done my undergraduate in statistics. Which sector is best for me after the MBA? No, I'll get back to you. So, my immediate, so following up on my example I just gave, my immediate supervisor is in the hospital right now due to COVID. Will it affect my application if I provide references of two seniors with whom? Okay, so I'm assuming he's really in the hospital with COVID in a bad way, right? Not just home with the sniffles, right? So yeah, you would, again, this is what the optional essay is for. The optional essay is for you to explain, like, listen, I couldn't get it to, for my supervisor. He's been in the hospital for several months with COVID or something like that, right? He's just not in the position to write this thing. And therefore, I provided you with two seniors, right? And, listen, try to find the most senior seniors you can find, not like somebody who's just above you or sits next to you and with the same title, because that doesn't really move the needle too much. But definitely explain it in the optional essay. But yeah, but that's the best you can do, right? So anyway, if you had an old boss that moved on to a different company within recent times, you can have that person do it as well. Somebody says, ew. All right, so can my commerce background become a roadblock to me building a career in consulting post? Well, I mean, that's a very open-ended question. If you want, my answer is no. Well, can it become one? Well, anything can become one, right? So I need a little more nuance here, a little more detail. Can my commerce background become a roadblock? Yeah, I would have to know why you believe it would be a roadblock, and then I could address the root cause of your concern. But right now, anything can be a roadblock. All right. So I'm scrolling up here. How much is it? Yeah, so that gap year, whatever, you just have to explain it. I'm going back to Satyaki. All right, so okay, thanks for the compliment, Nagarajan. All right, so Nita says, is it always recommended to write something in the optional essay, or can we leave? Okay, so listen, I don't want to sound mean here or like an idiot, right? But this is when you apply to business school, it is not an exercise in telling them everything you can possibly telling them. And again, jamming 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag, right? You'll come across as a poor communicator. You'll come across as disorganized. You'll come across as overwhelming, right? You want to be as efficient as possible when you write every essay, every sentence, your resume. Okay. All right. In a perfect world. But if you right now think that it's not just you, Nita, like anybody on this presentation or call, if you think that every single field on an application should be filled out, if given the opportunity, the answer is no. You say the answer is hell no, right? You only tell them things that are relevant, not things that you want to brag about because one time you stood first out of 300,000 students on some state exam, right? They don't give a shit about that, right? I mean, depending on the question that they ask, what they give a shit about is, do you have something to say? So if you were sick for 11 months, if you can't get a recommendation from your boss, if I'm trying to think what else, job changes. Yeah, so any type of gap, job change. If you failed a few courses as an undergrad early on, all sorts of things that are very pragmatic and tactical, that is what goes into the optional essay. If you just tell them another story that you probably ripped from another school's application, it will show. These people aren't stupid. These people have the benefit of seeing a gazillion, millions of essays, right? Or tens of thousands of essays at least. And they're going to see right through that. And they're going to see, wow, not only did this person not give a shit because they cut and pasted an essay from another school, right? They'll probably know what school that is, to be honest with you, based on how it's written. But they'll say, now this jerk, and I'm not talking about you, Nita, now this jerk wants me to actually read through all this shit, right? When I've just read through probably 50 essays in a day, most of which were bad. I want to go home. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I'm grumpy. I'm normally not a nice person as well, right? And they will resent it. You do not believe how much the people, and I used to work in admissions or volunteer in admissions, right? At UCLA, you will not believe how much they resent having to read that, right? So always tread lightly when it comes to like, oh, I'll just throw it in. It's not a big deal. Well, it's not a big deal to you because you don't get to see the bigger picture. And it tells them this person does not understand what's going on in this thing. So somebody earlier had a question about, hey, if I reach out to the admissions committee, should I type up and basically dump a bunch of bullet points into the email? The answer is no. They need to know right away from the title of your email what you want. From the first sentence of your email, make the request, move on. You can attach your resume, but don't dump your life story into it because nobody wants to answer an email like that. And often they can't because they don't have time, but it's just like they don't know what you want, right? And they're moving on. Okay. So let's see, PLV. Yeah, Mohammed, I have a good memory. All right. So PLV 1S says, hi, thank you for the session. I have done MBA from one of the top 3 business schools in India. I have 1 year. Okay, so right now, this is an email that the admissions committee, if it were longer, would not want to read. They want to know what you want. So PLV, what is your question? Have 1 year. Okay, what do you think would be the chances in that case? It's too hard to tell, PLV. Like I would need to know what your goals are. Remember, MBA, and this is a common mistake, and it's not a huge one because you're just asking a question, but listen, an MBA, what are your chances? What do you want to do? Right? The MBA is a forward-looking degree, right? You need it to get somewhere. So I don't know what your chances are of getting in anywhere or your appropriateness if I don't know what it is you want to do. Plus, I would need like 20 other pieces of background information, right? So it's not enough to know where you've been. I got to know where you want to go. All right, sir. Helena says, sir, what is your opinion? about MBA in business analytics after completing engineering, electronics and communication. Okay, great. What country is best for MBA in business analytics? All right, again, so okay, honestly, like with all due respect, Helena, I appreciate you asking this question. You need to ask questions like this. Never be afraid to ask a question, but you got to do your research, right? So, um, these are like you don't want to go, and why I'm saying this to you and anybody else who would ask a question like this is you don't want to go into like me, screw me, like who am I? Nobody, right? But you go into an information session at HBS or wherever, and you ask a question like that, they're gonna think like, holy shit, like you know this person hasn't even lifted a finger to try to get to understand the program, right? So ask it here, don't ask it there. All right. So what country? It's country agnostic. Listen, you want to go to the country, you want to go to a school. Listen, if you're very focused on jobs, right? You want to go to a location, a geography, whether that's Europe, United States, wherever, where there are plenty of jobs, right? So Indiana, a state in the United States, Mississippi, North Dakota, where there's no major metropolitan areas, don't do that, right? Even if you have to go to a shittier ranked school in the United States or whatever other country, if it is in a major metropolitan area, then I would do that. If you absolutely want to get out of India, you want to nail down a visa, you got to pick an MBA program that is STEM designated, and almost all of them are now. So you're going to get that optional practical training period afterwards, and then hopefully translate that into an H-1B visa, right? But if you wanted to know specific schools that I love and have long loved before they even got popular, that I believe to be very pragmatic in terms of getting you a job, I think the number one school on that list would have to be the University of Washington, Foster, right? Um, Most of the people that go there are local, but when you start looking at the salaries and people are graduating, they're making 140,000 American dollars plus a bonus. You know, you look at schools like Emory, similar salary. There's these kind of outliers, like what's up with these schools, right? Who would go there? My mom and dad wouldn't want me to go there, right? They don't even know the reputation. But you start looking, forget about the whole reputation, mom and dad, what are the friends going to think back in India thing, right? And you just say like, so long, I'll be driving around in my Mercedes, you know, not even worried about that, right? Upon graduation, University of Washington, Foster, even schools like USC, you know, in LA, Emory University, Goizuda in Atlanta. Those are all schools you want to target. Now, the first thing you should do is so Helena, you need to go look at like, what is a job that I could get even without having an MBA? So go look and think, okay, when I graduate from business school with an MBA, but let's pretend I don't have an MBA, what is a job that I could just like, it's on lockdown, right? Like shooting fish in a barrel. I could hit it blindfolded, right? And not miss. And you go through and you look and you're like, okay, a lot of people who've worked in my role, my current company, have gone on, okay, yeah, with an MBA or not, have gone on and worked in this area. You know, they've gone on and worked for investment banks, you know, building these super duper models, right? Or whatever you may do. So you would go and you would say, okay, now where are those banks located? I can't get into maybe Columbia or NYU Stern because I have a really bad GMAT or whatever, or bad grades, or I went to some school somewhere that nobody's ever heard of. Okay, fine. What you would say is, well, you know, does Cornell have a campus there? Does whatever school have a campus there in New York, or that's close enough to New York? And maybe I should apply to Yale or whatever. So start looking around. If you want to be pragmatic, right? And I used to never think this way. I used to always think, yeah, I got to go to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, or you ain't shit. Totally changed. You want the money. To be honest, I mean, listen, this is just me, right? As speaking as an American, right? You want the cash. You want to pay back your loans, right? You want to drive around in a nice car. You want all those things that you want. Don't worry about what other people think of your degree. You want to be pragmatic. University of Washington, Foster, Emory. There's all these other schools. So if you want to shortlist stuff, go look at the schools where you're going to get paid to get out. I'm talking like 120, 130, 140 grand on up. Go look to see though what major that they're STEM designated, of course, but what major metropolitan cities they're in, because you cannot underestimate the how much work you as the individual are going to have to do once you go to school. If you rely on the career center to get you a job, you're fucked, right? I hate to use that word, but that is completely the appropriate word, right? You have to do the humping. You have to do the work yourself. You have to pound the pavement. And so you're going to get there and you want to be in a major metropolitan area because maybe you can't buy a car. You got to take the bus, you got to take Uber, whatever, but you want as many hands-on pragmatic opportunities as close as possible to you, walking distance even, right? Spitting distance, that you can go, whether it's days on the jobs through a bunch of clubs, whether it's this, whether it's that, right? And an area of the country that you'd actually like to live in that has plenty of jobs would be Seattle. University of Washington Foster is right there. So go for it, right? And I know they're getting props or credit or a lot of attention lately because they do have like really good jobs. But I was saying this shit back in the day, right? They got it from me. Anyway, so anyway, but be pragmatic like that. Now, of course, you can have a mix, right? So go for the Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, whatever, right? And if you get in there, go. Swear to God. If you get a full ride, even better, right? Don't expect it though. By the way, the only people I've seen get from India that have gotten a lot of money from Harvard, Stanford, Wharton are people who have extremely high GMAT scores, right? It matters a little less with respect to BITS, an IIT, SRCC, things like that. I worked with a guy, University of Pune who got in, right? So, whatever. But just know that you're going to get money from schools. So if you have a high GMAT, anything 750 plus, the game to play, in my opinion, the strategy, not game, strategy, is to apply to schools that are, of course, at the top. You may not get money, right? That's where demographics kind of comes in, right? If you're from an overrepresented demographic. But then as you start creeping on down to like the Dukes of the world, the Dardens of the world, or UCLAs of the world, pick a major city, right? That's where they're going to start giving you a lot of cash. If you have a 770, 780, you might be able to get 2 years paid. So just keep that in mind. So you don't have to all whatever. And then you can have an option. Do I want to go to Wharton? I got nothing. Or can I go to UCLA, which has great jobs in business analytics or great relationships with recruiters, and they're paying for everything, And it's like, stop caring about what mom and dad think with respect to reputation, and just, consider UCLA, not just because I went there. All right. Mr. John Fenich says, I recently started a new job and feel my direct supervisor is ill-equipped to provide a letter of recommendation. Can I ask a former? The answer is yes, John. I would not ask a new supervisor for so many reasons. The first is you probably didn't tell them you were thinking about going to get an MBA when you interviewed and got the job. Now, maybe you didn't know that you wanted to get an MBA, and maybe your job is not good now, and well, you're reevaluating, and now you're going to apply. But I'll tell you right now, if you were to go to your current supervisor and say, hey, boss, I need a recommendation. I've only been working for you for 3 months. He's going to think you may have stabbed him or her, stabbed him in the back, or you lied. It's not going to be good. In the very least, because you don't know too much now, because you've only been there for a while, you haven't built up your credibility. They're probably going to think that. But then you're going to spend the next year. If you get in, it'll just be a year, neutralized. They're going to put you in the coat room. They're not going to give you a lot of responsibility, leadership. You'll be training your replacement. And if you don't get in, because it is round 2 or whatever now, and it's getting late in the round, and this year is tough for international students, John. I don't know where you're from, but you could look like an ass, right? So do not ask your current supervisor. And for any reason, for all the reasons I just told you, but for the most, it's because that guy doesn't really know you that well, and you most definitely won't be rewarded. So it is completely acceptable. And I would tell you, you'd be a damn fool if you ask your current boss. Go back and ask the old guys, right? And then in the optional essay, you would say something like, so this is why I say always read through the entire application right now. Stop listening to this presentation, go read through the whole application, and you'll see that a lot of times where you have to fill out what your recommenders are, it'll say, if you have not chosen your current recommender, here's a little free-form user interface box where you can type in why you didn't choose him or her to write this, right? And what John or anybody else is going to write in this situation, you're going to say, I am not providing a recommendation from my current supervisor. I just started at Acme Tech or wherever, and my current supervisor has only been so for the last 3 months since I started. We do not have the level of interaction so far that would allow him to provide a holistic assessment of my professional abilities and personal attributes, right? Instead, I am providing a much better a recommendation from somebody who is infinitely more qualified to assess my professional and personal characteristics or accomplishments, right? That person is Paul Lancelotti, or that person is whoever their name is. Be specific about who the name is, right? So they can connect the dots, as well as, so it'd be Susie Smith, as well as Joe Blow, my former supervisors. Collectively, they have a combined, our time together, our years of experience is like 6 years. together. So you worked for each one at the same time for 3 years simultaneously, or whatever, sum up the months of work experience, boom, put it there. So that number better be a lot bigger than 3 months or however, right? And then that's it. They get it, right? So not only you're saying, you don't have to say like he's not encouraging of my MBA, or I didn't tell him, or he's going to think I'm a sellout and I'm backstabber. Don't go into that, right? Sometimes you have to, but in your case, don't go into that. You've only started working there. So if you've been working there for a year or two and you can't get that guy, your boss or gal, to write a recommendation, then you have to say like, listen, I told my boss about my plans to get an MBA and he or she is not supportive. So therefore, I'm choosing to get a recommendation from somebody else who knows me just as well. And that's when I would tell you, pick somebody who you worked with at that same company that's left or can keep their mouth shut, right? But not that boss. If your boss, you know your boss better than anybody, right? If that person is going to have a bad reaction, or you're not going to get your bonus, which is half your salary or something, right? You're going to get crucified or whatever. Then don't do it, right? It's not. There are other ways. This is not a huge deal if you get the right person to substitute in, right? All right. So hopefully that explains it, John. But not an uncommon situation, by the way, and it's easily explainable. Just make sure the replacement is not a doofus, right? Not some guy from the bar, right? Okay. So hi, SC says hi. I am a male engineering electronics grad from India. I got into hardcore finance job post-graduation in India's largest bank. Do I fall into the India IT male pool? The answer is no. You fall into the India banking male group, which is a smaller group, right? Hardcore finance job, if you're like a quant guy building models, things like that, risk models, whatever models, right? I know quite a few guys from India that I've worked with. All of them have gone to Wharton, incidentally. But if you're kind of in that if you're in that role, like there are, Wharton's right up your alley, Booth is right up your alley. Yeah, Kellogg, sure. But Wharton and Booth would love to take a look at you. Now, if you've like demonstrated some exceptional leadership or whatever, sure, Harvard. Stanford, by the way, is a really hard school for anybody to get into, not just Indian IT males, anybody, because Stanford, if you say something matters most to you, right? I want to bring running water to every village. Then they're going to want to see that you're doing that now for work or something in the social sector, for example, right? It doesn't have to be in the social sector, but if you're not putting your money where your mouth is now through your work, it's going to be very hard for you to get in. So if you're still a consultant, if you're still a banker, if you're not working for some VC or private equity firm investing in green energy, or you're not working for a Dahlberg Greenspan or a Bridgespan, and bringing running water to some village, or talking about cleanliness and whatever, talking about poop or whatever in some developing part of the country, and you've worked on that project, and it's going to be tough. All right. Anyway, let's see here. How does one demonstrate career progression to the ICOMs if one has been in a similar position for different companies for a few years? I'll be taking up more. Okay, well, the title doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, listen, you want to advance past being like IT dude or whatever, right? Systems admin. You want, but they will look at the level of responsibility. And again, this is something for the optional essay, which is like, I want to explain why I have maintained the same title, but actually moving to these other companies has represented more exposure, more whatever. So maybe you worked at a company that had like 1,000 network admins or whatever. Now you're basically the one network admin, but essentially you're the only tech guy there. And I'm not stereotyping, I'm just using an example, right? You would want to go on and say basically that I am essentially the CTO. No, but you would want to say, like, put some parameters around it, right? Is it a bread box? Is it a mailbox? Is it a whatever shipping container? Tell them you got to set the parameters so they know. But a lot of that should be defined in your resume. So let's say it's a small entrepreneurial company now that you're working for, and you're basically the only tech guy there. You manage all the security, that whatever, besides playing video games at work. Like, you would go on and you'd basically say, I am the de facto head of our, network, whatever, our IT department, right? And I have these like minions underneath me. I'm responsible for $30 million in equipment in here and in the United States or wherever. So put that all on your resume so they know, okay, yeah, the freaking title's the same. But definitely this is, how one company measures something is not how another company measures something. You see that with analysts and titles like associates. Sometimes you'll even see like Analyst and associate reversed. I forgot at some companies. Anyway, okay, so yeah, BITS Pilani is a really, really good school. Like the schools that I see getting into Harvard from India, they're the ones that I mentioned. Um, every once in a while, you'll see something different, but usually I see BITS, SRCC, a couple of other colleges from Delhi University, University of Delhi. Then usually what I'll see is I'll see IITD, IITB, IIT Kanpur, IIT Kharagpur, and then there's IIT Madras, right? That's right. And I know they're opening up a new IIT every week or something, supposedly, right? I hear about that all day from clients, but yeah, not so much from any other school. Anyway, but yeah, every once in a while, somebody from Pune, will get in, whatever, right? This is my point. If you have the right experience, it doesn't matter where you went to undergrad, right? Um, uh, whatever. So it's all about. It's more than just that, right? Where you went to undergrad. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so John asked another question. Thank you, Paul. Makes perfect sense. I am U.S., not international. Do you think round 3 to 5 applicants? Okay, I don't know where round 5 would be. Maybe a European school with deadlines in spring. See, okay, this is a good question by John. Listen, there's not a huge difference in acceptance rate really that I've seen between round 1 and round 2. Round 1, people tend to be a very aggressive, very organized. Round 2, people tend to be a little bit more late to the game, right? I think the competition is lesser in round 2, to be honest with you. But this is where you start getting into a situation where money does start to run out, or they don't know how much money they have, right? But this is where the pool of money starts to become less. Now, if you walk in, come to the table with a 780 or 770 or something like that, you're going to get money. I mean, it depends on the school, of course, but you'll get money from somebody, right? And again, they say it's need based, but I've just seen it be GMAT score based, right? So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I doubt it. I think Stanford got caught lying about this, by the way, 3 years ago. If you look it up, like Stanford, financial aid scandal, liars. Anyway, Stanford, little old Stanford. Anyway, so they give it to people from certain industries a lot, venture capital, private equity, so the rich keep getting richer. Very nice. Another business school lesson for everybody. And then the other thing too is they'll give it to people with monster GMAT scores. What I've seen from personal experience is if you're female, you're more likely to get it. And that's not strictly because you're female, right? I mean, that's the easiest way for me to sum it up, which is whatever. But oftentimes, depending on certain industries or certain life experiences, if you articulate that in an essay, a lot of times women may have these certain types of tracks or paths or things depending on where they're from. I won't even get into that anymore because I'm probably going to look like an idiot, but and I am. But just know that like you have a little bit of an advantage if you are female, but definitely high GMAT score. Definitely if you're in finance. Now, if you're a female with a high GMAT score from finance, you can, you're God bless you. You deserve everything you're going to get. All right. So the common perception, okay. The common perception here in India is you need engineering degree if you want to build your career in consulting, especially with MBB. For everybody, that's everybody together, McKinsey, Bain, BCG firms. What's your take on that? My take on that is that that's pretty much what I see. If that's a common perception in India, I don't think the whole country is lying. Yeah, that's what I see, right? Yeah, including in banking, investment banking in India. I see with the Deutsche Banks, Credit Suisse, whatever the cool job is. The engineers are usually going and doing that type of stuff, right? Especially involves a lot of model building. All right, so yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? It's like these. Look, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG. They have very set recruiting processes from certain schools in India. It's very hard to crack that, right? If you're not going to their target school, and that's a system they know and love. It's a system that's perpetuated and kind of locked in because the guys now running the show at these companies all went to these whatever IIT may be out there or BITS or whatever, right? So it's like they kind of keep it in house, right? So anyway, I mean, yeah, but I've known other guys, by the way, I've known other guys who have gotten into BCG Bain, particularly. I work with a lot of people from Bain India, BCG India, and that didn't go to those schools. Now their path is a little less traditional. I have a guy who and this, I never thought this worked, but he just emailed one of the directors there out of the blue and somehow landed an interview. I don't know what he said in that, that interview, but whatever it was in that, whatever was said, sorry, in that interview, but in that email is worth its weight in gold. All right. So Ashwarya Jadhav, how to show leadership skills with 3 to 4 years experience when one hasn't got a leadership opportunity to work. Well, you may not have a leadership title, but I'm hoping that you've been asking for more responsibility at work. So I don't know where you work, what you do, but the trick here is like the business schools don't really care what the title is so much, but they want to see a habit of you asking for more leadership responsibility. And you can always make a better case with informal leadership opportunity that you earned or gained based on your performance and then did a great job, or a project you completed where you didn't have an official or a high title, but you still convinced the big bosses what of your solution or what to do. So remember, informal leadership, soft leadership skill, and examples around that are much more effective than if you're like, listen, I was CEO by the time I was 22, and I told all those MFers out there, you better do what I want to do. I'm going to rip your heads off, right? And then lo and behold, they did everything I wanted them to do. Can you believe that? I am a leader. It doesn't work that way. Those are the worst stories. Now I exaggerate, but it's always better if you're kind of like the underdog without a title, but you are like you get things to work or run on time because of your soft leadership skills. Anyway, good rule of thumb to get a scholarship at a program is to have a 750 or above, and to not apply to all the top programs. So yeah, certainly apply to the top programs, but if you have a 750 and you're applying to a UVA or a Darden or a Michigan or even a Duke, schools that are a little off the beaten path, ranked closer to 10 than 1, that's where you're going to start getting money, right? How much? Okay, here's a good question, I think, because I haven't read it the whole way through. Mr. Pranab Sharma asks, how much does low GPA matter? I've done my computer science engineering from JP Institute, Noida. Thank you. I was going to get it confused with the other one. Looking to apply to Anderson, Rotman, Booth. Do research papers make a difference? Okay. Low GPA, it depends on how long you've been working, right? So what I've seen is that often schools do not care that much about your GPA. I know it sounds weird, right? So everybody who's got a high GPA is like, oh shit, right? But no, seriously. I mean, they listen, all things being equal, they want the 9 point somebody rather than the 5 point nobody, right? So what I would say here is that if you've been working for a few years, 3, 4 years, the impact of your GPA lessons, of course, that's something probably you already knew. But even, and I know what the great points are at the IITs. I'm very familiar with that. But IIT, if you get listen, at some school you get a 6.5, 6.5, that's good. At IIT, if you're getting like a 7.7, that's bad, right? Whatever curve they grade on. But I've seen guys and gals in the 7s from IITs actually get into HBS. Now, I will not tell you the names and other top programs, right? I will not tell you the names, but usually there's a reason why. They have a lot of low GPAs, not because they're dumb, because they're not, but because they were heavily involved in leadership on campus as an undergraduate. So all things being equal, in my opinion, based on what I've seen over the last 13 years, is if you have to trade a few GPA points for more leadership points, do it, right? Now, it's too late now because everybody on this call is probably graduated, but listen, if you just have to have an excuse. If you're like smoking hash and playing PlayStation 4, unless it's FIFA, you don't have an excuse, right? So what I would say is like make sure you can backfill all that stuff with leadership experience, right? Especially at the top schools. Now, with respect to JP Institute, I'm not as familiar with that institution, right? I can't make an assessment as to like, how admissions committees view that, but go and look online. LinkedIn is your friend. Again, the guys who went to JP Institute, specifically in Noida, I think I pronounced that right. Where did they end up with respect to MBAs, right? And in the States or Canada or Europe, right? Go look to see where they're graduating from, right? Now, if they made the jump from India directly to an MBA program in the United States, which ones, right? It doesn't matter as much if like some guy moved with Tata Consulting Services to America, and then after a few years he did his part-time MBA, and then that's how he got it at Anderson or whatever. Don't look at those guys or gals, right? Look at the guys and gals who made the jump directly, right? So how can I compensate GPA apart from GMAT? Oh, well, hopefully you have a technical degree, right, Mr. Sharma? Hopefully, your role now, I won't say it needs to be technical, but it needs to be somewhat quantitative and analytical. Like if you work for a consulting company, you have to build a lot of models. So on your resume, that would definitely influence leadership and management and getting shit done and executing and working directly for the big boss and all that stuff. But also a few lines on there about like, re-engineered all of the firm's models in doing yada yada, right? Stuff like that. Don't go overboard, right? Because they can assume if you have like a technical degree, you're working a little bit of a technical capacity, you're no dummy. But just call a few of those things out, right? All right. To add to my question, Paul, I have like a low GMAT 650, two fintech startups, full-time job as a credit. Okay, so again, SC, like, what are your goals, right? So I understand what you're saying, but anyway, listen. Um, Let me get back to you on that one, right? So email me from this conversation if you're here. Email GMAT Club. I'll try to do my best to answer fully, right? Okay, Vishnu. Hi, Paul. Completed my bachelor's in civil engineering from IIT, 2012. 8 years of experience in analytics. Do I fall into the over? So you're probably about 29 years old now. I mean, it depends on your work advancement, your work track. So yeah, you're in analytics, but that doesn't tell me much. Are you managing? Are you still crunching that same spreadsheet you did 8 years ago? You must be very focused, right? Or are you managing a team? Have you been promoted? Are you like the right hand man or woman of the boss or the CEO? Like, what have you accomplished there? How have you changed how people do work there, right? Even if you don't have a super duper title. So that's fine. Okay, Raza got blocked. Oh well, we're gonna miss him. All right, Paul. John asked, do you think a GMAT course is necessary for 750 above? Wait, if you already have a 750 or you want to get a 750? I think you're saying if you want to get a 750. I think a GMAT course is relevant if you lack the discipline to study or if you're really rusty, right? Now, how many average months to be spent studying? I think, honestly, you want to break 100 hours, 120 hours, right? Going to take a couple months at least, right? Now, what I've heard consistently, and I have no financial relationship or even no relationship with this company, swear to God, full disclosure, nothing. But what the one company I've consistently heard good reviews from, and I believe they're from India, is called eGMAT. They say the product is excellent, right? I've worked at Veritas Prep. I've tutored with Revolution Prep books. I used to work at Kaplan. And the one that I consistently get good feedback on over the years is eGMAT. So I don't know. I mean, give them a whirl for GMAT. Okay, 8 years outside of undergrad. Should I be talking about undergrad leadership? It depends on the question, John. So usually no. You should be talking about your leadership at work because 8 years is, you're too far removed. That's all. So it depends on the question, but definitely if they ask you about a leadership experience, you want to default to the much more recent ones, and that usually means work, right? Because you're a much different person than you were 8 years ago, unless 8 years ago something happened in that leadership experience that was like lighting a bottle rocket or something. It's like a launching pad for who you became today. So let's say you were a drug addicted homeless kid, right? And something happened where you got into some leadership responsibility, and then that really changed the course of your life. What, 8 years ago? You could talk about it then, right? But you would have to spend special emphasis towards the end of the essay where you're talking about how it's continued to affect your effectiveness and your leadership and your impact on others to this day. Anyway, Gaurav says, hello, sir. Hello, sir, to you. Sanchit says, with the current COVID situation worsening in Europe and in the United States, would you suggest pursuing an MBA for NCI or HEC, considering that? Yeah, I would do it now. I would definitely do it now with things being so up in the air, right? Maybe there's going to be layoffs coming, big wave. I don't know. Listen, don't worry about these COVID things that are going on, right? There's going to be some other shit that happens in your life later and whatever. Like, just pretend like none of this stuff. Listen, it's easy for me to say pretend like it's not happening, but if it's the right time, it's almost irrespective of COVID or not, right? If you need it, you need it. Okay, so the first few semesters, you're probably not going to be in the classroom. You're going to be spending a lot of money and doing some bullshit, online, right? Maybe showing up once in a while. You're not going to be getting the whole touchy-feely building relationships thing out of it. But the more you wait, the more painful it's going to be for you. You want to get married, you're going to have kids, you're making more money at work, you got to take time off. It's going to cost you more. So to me, it's like it's better if you go younger if you can get in, even if COVID's around, Trump's president, whatever, right? Just go and do it, right? Yeah, it can take. Listen, if you're trying to time this shit, Sanchit, right? Let me know what you know so that I can invest or divest, right? Just do it sooner than later, right? All right, so Sarvam Patel. Hello, Paul, U.S. citizen here that is interested in international MBA, LBS. What pros and cons do you think exist for a U.S. citizen going? I don't think there are any cons going abroad. I think they welcome people from the United States because they don't get a lot actually at these European programs because there's so many options here in the States. But what I think you need to think about is something you brought up as well, which is what do I do with an LBS degree, right? I mean, you come back, and unless you're going to be working in a major metropolitan area or whatever, it's just not going to be. People are going to be like, "Oh, that's cool," Why'd you go there? Why'd you come back, right? And that's going to be the end of it. I don't listen. If the alumni network doesn't exist for all intents and purposes in your target industry in the States or in the target city or wherever, then what are you getting it for? Okay, yeah, you wanted to study abroad for 2 years in London. You've always wanted to go to London, all this shit, right? I would say you got to think about the longer term effects because you're trading. And I'm not saying that is your reason, but if you're trading is to have some like life changing international experience, like some movie or whatever, then I would not do that, right? Uh, I would go to LBS and I would plan on staying there, right? In London. You're not going to have as much mobility as one might think across the rest of Europe. But I think if you go to LBS, you should, even as an American, be able to find a job in the UK, right? I don't know what the visa limitations are, whatever. I assume hopefully they wouldn't be that bad, but I would plan on staying there for a little while, work for a McKinsey or whoever, uh, multinational bank, and then have them transfer you back to the States if you want, right? But at that point, life has a funny way of like getting hooked up with relationships, and all of a sudden you're, whatever, right? You're stuck. Anyway, so just keep that in mind, right? All right. So anyway, so let's see. Yeah, I mean, listen, even NCOD in the United States, by the way, people are like, what is that? Right? Or like, oh, I think I kind of heard of it. I would argue it's better to go to some local school like UCLA Anderson or USC if you're trying to get a job back in Los Angeles, California, or Northern California, right? LBS, just think long and hard about that, but plan on staying. Anyway, all right. So SC, email me, please. All right. So if I didn't get to your question, please email me, and I'll try to answer. Give me the necessary background, right? Your resume if you have it. I know some of you apparently don't have that yet. That's okay. All right. So, or post a thread in my thread, or post a question in my thread on GMAT Club. Ask Paul Anzalotti. That's all the time I have for you ladies and germs today. So hopefully I'll hear from you with a good question for me. Have a nice day. Bye.